Welcome back to The Deep Dive. We're diving headfirst today into something pretty extraordinary. Ukraine's major drone attack deep inside Russia. Operation Spiderweb, they apparently called it.
Yeah, and this wasn't just near the border. We're talking about hitting air bases really central to Russia's strategic aviation. Places hundreds, maybe thousands of kilometers away. Bases they likely thought were completely safe.
Exactly. And that's what we want to unpack in this deep dive. We'll get into the details of the attack itself, try to understand the immediate impact on Russia, look at the very different takes on the risks involved.
Big differences there.
And, discuss what it tells us about how warfare is changing.
And we've looked at quite a bit of material news reports, detailed analysis from think tanks like CSIS and RAND. Also commentary from folks like former U.S. Envoy Keith Kellogg, the Atlantic Council's take, even perspectives from outlets like the World Socialist website.
A real mix, then. Technical, strategic, political angles.
Right. Some sources mentioned wider things like oil markets, but we're really focusing just on the operation itself for this discussion.
Okay, so Operation Spiderweb, let's get into it. What do the sources say about how this actually went down?
Well, the reporting points to Ukraine's security service, the SBU, launching it on June 1st, 2025.
And the targets, highly strategic, right? 4 airfields deep inside Russia.
That's the report. And not just any airfields. We're talking about bases, housing key long-range bombers, the Tu-95s and Tu-22M3s. The ones Russia uses to fire cruise missiles at Ukrainian cities.
So hitting their main standoff weapons platforms. But it wasn't only bombers, was it? They went after intelligence planes, too.
Yes, the A-50s. And that's a huge deal. These are like Russia's AWACS, Airborne Command and Control. Crucial for managing the air picture, coordinating strikes. Russia has very few, fewer than 10 in total. Hitting even one really hurts their awareness.
The sheer scale sounds incredible, assuming the claims are accurate. Something like 117 drones.
That was the number reported, yeah. And Ukraine claimed, I think, over 30 aircraft hit, with damage estimated around $7 billion.
$7 billion, wow. Though we should say Russia acknowledged the attack happened, and some damage, but they definitely dispute those numbers.
Oh, absolutely. They dispute the scale. Kiev hasn't independently verified the full extent either, so there's some fog there.
Still, the planning alone, sources say 18 months. A year and a half.
Think about that. 18 months to plan one operation, and the nerve to hit targets scattered across Russia-Murmansk, way up north, near Finland and Norway, all the way to Irkutsk, deep in Siberia.
Places previously thought completely out of reach.
Untouchable, yeah. One source even compared its complexity to, legendary Israeli intelligence ops. Pretty high praise, or at least a striking comparison.
Which brings us to the how. How did they manage this? It clearly wasn't conventional missiles. What's the tech? What were the tactics?
This is where it gets really interesting, kind of asymmetric. The sources suggest they smuggled the drones into Russia first.
Smuggled them!
Using cargo trucks. But these trucks apparently had disguised wooden cabins built onto them, and inside those cabins were hidden launch compartments for the drones.
So mobile launch platforms blending in with regular traffic, that's clever. A way to get past perimeter defenses.
Exactly. And the drones themselves, not some super high-tech military gear.
No, what were they?
Inexpensive FPV drones. First-person view. The kind hobbyists might adapt. Reports put the cost at maybe $600 to $1,000 each. Accessible tech.
$600 drones taking out multi-million-dollar bombers.
Potentially, yes. They apparently use readily available parts. Open-source autopilot software like ArduPilot.
Or source software. Guiding attack drones deep inside Russia. That's wild. How did they control them from so far away?
Reportedly, they were controlled remotely, but from outside Russia. The sources say they actually leveraged Russia's own 4G and LTE mobile networks.
Using Russia's cell network against them.
Seems so. Onboard computers, maybe like a Raspberry Pi, connected to modems and webcams for the link and some navigation input.
And that ArduPilot software, that would give them some autonomy, right? For navigation stability if the signal dropped.
Precisely. That helps deal with latency or patchy signal coverage over those distances. Critical piece.
And the targeting? That sounds sophisticated too. AI-assisted.
Yeah, that's what the report suggests. Possibly train the AI using images of old Soviet planes, maybe from museums in Ukraine, to recognize specific structural weak points.
Like what?
Things like where the pylons attach under the wing or fuel seams. Hitting those precise spots for maximum damage, even with a small payload. It's about making a cheap drone incredibly effective with smart software.
And then they covered the tracks. The trucks self-destructed.
That's what the sources indicate, yeah. likely to stop Russian investigators figuring out the launch method, analyzing the tech, trying to reverse engineer it. Keeping the method secret was key.
It really is a textbook example of asymmetric warfare, isn't it? Low-cost ingenuity against high-value traditional military power.
A very stark illustration, yeah. How accessible tech and clever tactics can really challenge the old assumptions about military might just being about expensive hardware.
So let's talk about that impact. Hitting strategic bombers. That sounds serious. What does it actually mean for Russia's capabilities?
Well, it means hitting a really key part of their long-range strikeability. These bombers, the Tu-95s, Tu-22M3s, they're also part of Russia's nuclear triad, the air leg, designed to carry those long-range cruise missiles.
And replacing planes like that, it's not easy for Russia now, is it?
That's a huge vulnerability this highlights. These are old Soviet-era designs. Russia's current industrial base, the supply chain spread across former Soviet countries. It makes building new ones, or even doing major repairs on many damaged ones, extremely difficult, maybe impossible quickly.
And hitting a base like Diaghilevo that affects more than just the planes parked there, right?
Correct. Sources identify it as a major hub for maintaining the bomber fleet and also for pilot training. Damage there messes up the whole support system training crews, keeping the existing planes flying.
And the A-50s, again, losing or damaging those, with so few to begin with.
It's a massive blow. Fewer than 10 total, as we said. Any loss severely degrades their ability to see what's happening in Ukrainian airspace, track threats, coordinate their own air force. It sort of blinds them.
The sources also really emphasized how this exposed weaknesses deep inside Russia.
Yes, big time, especially in their rear defenses. Their standard systems, like Pantsir or the S-300, they're mostly designed for faster, higher things like jets or missiles. They seem pretty ineffective against these small, low-flying drones launched from relatively close by, from those trucks.
So a gap in their layered defense.
A critical gap, far from the front lines, yeah.
Looking forward, could this actually force Moscow to change how they use their remaining bombers?
It might. They might have to pull them back even further, disperse them more, which makes operations harder, slower. It could reduce the tempo, the overall role these bombers play against Ukraine, just because it becomes logistically more challenging.
Okay, now, an attack this audacious, hitting the strategic assets of a major power, it inevitably raises the question of escalation. And the sources had really different views on this.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
On one side, you had someone like former U.S. Envoy Kellogg. His point was, when you hit what he called the national survival system, which includes nuclear triad components like these bombers, well, the risk levels go way up because you just don't know how the other side will react.
So that view sees crossing that line, even conventionally, as inherently dangerous.
Right. And interestingly, a somewhat parallel concern, though, from a totally different political angle, came from the World Socialist website. They framed the attack as NATO-driven and argued it risked nuclear catastrophe, calling it a dangerous expansion of the war.
So some saw it as pushing things toward a really dangerous edge.
Then you have the Rand Corporation analysis. They sort of framed the whole war as having these built-in escalation risks, deliberate and accidental. They noted Putin has maybe been more cautious than some predicted, but they also suggested he could escalate, maybe even consider nuclear use under extreme circumstances.
With what circumstances?
Things like a rapid collapse on the battlefield, a direct threat to his regime's survival, or if he perceived direct NATO intervention.
And Rand saw Ukraine hitting targets inside Russia as part of this dynamic.
Yes, they viewed it as a deliberate choice by Kyiv to raise the costs for Russia's leadership, to hinder their military. But Rand also warned this could provoke Russian retaliation, maybe against Ukrainian leaders, potentially spinning into an escalatory cycle if Ukraine then hit back again. It's a volatile ladder.
What about the political reaction, especially in Washington?
Well, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt confirmed President Trump wasn't informed beforehand.
Okay.
And Leavitt reiterated the president's stance, saying, the president does not want to see this war prolonged. He wants this war to stop.
Meanwhile, the Atlantic Council had a different interpretation, framing it more in terms of political leverage.
Right. Their analysis suggested this operation pushed back hard against any idea that the war was just inevitably going Russia's way. And interestingly, they argued it actually gave President Trump leverage against Putin to pressure him towards a ceasefire.
How so?
They linked it to growing pressure in D.C., like a Senate sanctions bill getting more sponsors, and mentioned reports of Trump's impatience with Putin not engaging on U.S.-led talks, recalling Trump had apparently even called Putin crazy previously.
And there was also a connection made to missile defense.
Yes, one perspective discussed within that source suggested Ukraine's success here could bolster the argument for President Trump's proposed Golden Dome missile defense system for the U.S., perhaps even seeing Ukraine as a potential partner in developing defenses against such threats.
And in Russia itself, the reaction from war bloggers sounded intense.
Very strong, yeah. Reports quoted some calling it Russia's Pearl Harbor, demanding major escalation, an end to any talk of negotiations. The official Kremlin line was just that an investigation was underway, and Putin was informed online.
And Ukraine's reaction, especially on the diplomacy front.
The SBU head, Severomorsk, basically said Ukraine will keep responding to Russian terror. But then, maybe surprisingly, after such a bold strike, President Zelensky announced Ukraine would attend peace talks in Istanbul.
Talks he'd previously dismissed?
Yeah, previously called them a stalling tactic. Sources pointed out that even after this attack, Moscow wasn't talking about boycotting those talks.
Although one source did maintain the view that a real deal with Russia over Ukraine was never realistic anyway, so a lot of uncertainty about what this means for talks versus escalation.
A very wide range of takes on that for sure.
Okay, let's step back from the immediate reactions. What are the sort of bigger picture lessons here for warfare? Sources like CSIS pulled out several key things.
Yeah, first, it's a powerful reminder that cheap, accessible drone systems built with open source stuff can actually destroy incredibly expensive, high-value military hardware. That $600 drone versus a strategic bomber picture is stark.
And specifically for Russia, losing these old Soviet bombers is a hit they really can't easily fix.
Exactly. Their industrial base just isn't set up to replace that capability quickly, if at all.
It also showed that even deep, supposedly secure infrastructure is really vulnerable now.
Right. Vulnerable to small drones if you don't have specific layered counter-drone defenses. The big conventional systems often aren't suited for that threat, especially when it comes from nearby.
And the role of autonomy in these unmanned systems seems increasingly vital.
Absolutely essential, especially when you're operating beyond reliable comms range. That ability to navigate and stabilize on its own, like with ArduPilot, is key.
Plus the AI targeting, adding that precision.
Yeah, letting even a basic drone hit just the right spot to maximize damage gets you more bang for your buck, basically.
It wasn't just about hitting planes, it was about hitting the whole system, right?
That's a really important strategic point from the analysis. The planning seemed aimed at disabling the entire capability.
Yeah.
The planes, the logistics, the maintenance, the training, not just picking off individual assets.
And finally, that emphasis on secrecy, the self-destructing trucks.
Crucial. Deny the enemy intel, stop them reverse engineering your methods, slow down their counter moves. Operational security.
So when you put it all together, these trends really show how tech, agility, clever thinking, using accessible tools, it can completely challenge old ideas about military power, cost, and what's vulnerable. It's reshaping things right now.
We're definitely seeing that shift happen in real time.
Okay, so to wrap up this deep dive, Operation Spiderweb was clearly a major event. A complex, asymmetric attack that hit Russia's strategic capabilities hard, exposed some surprising vulnerabilities deep inside their territory, and has really stirred up debate among experts about escalation, political leverage, and the future.
And we've heard a whole spectrum of views from the sources we look at, from deep concerns about nuclear risks to analyses focused on political maneuvering to the stark lessons about modern defense gaps. There's definitely no single consensus on what this all means going forward.
Which leaves us and you with maybe a final thought to consider. If technology that's relatively cheap, widely available, combined with some serious ingenuity and bold logistics, can reach thousands of kilometers to hit highly sensitive military targets deep inside a major power, what does that really imply for the future, for national security strategies, for defense spending, and maybe even for the global balance of power itself in this rapidly changing world?